Hello, everybody, and welcome back to All Things N365 Compliance with me, Ryan John Murphy, Compliance Lead at Epic Global and Microsoft MVP. And as always, Nikki Chappell. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Ryan. Hello, everyone. My name is Nikki Chappell. I'm the Principal Cloud Architect at Cloudway, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP, both in security and Microsoft 365 apps and services. So today, this is a part 2 session. So the last episode, we were talking about introducing you to data loss prevention. We went through a very simple policy to show you how you can block external sharing with a sensitivity label. Now, DLP is really cool. You can do some really clever things with it. So today, we want to take it to that next step and show you how you can create some more complex conditions for real life scenarios that you may want to use in your organization.
Yes, indeed. Just while you're going to share your screen there, then, Nikki, I'll just talk people through what the aim is for this particular episode. So there's going to be many occasions where you need multiple conditions, okay? Those multiple conditions can be positive and negative conditions. And what I mean by that is you want an include and then a not include. And then you may need an and or an or Boolean statement. Now, these are possible to do. Some of the customers that me and Nikki were just talking about, or some of the projects that me and Nikki were just talking about, having done these before, is not everyone is the same. They may have a multitude of conditions that state this needs to exist in the actual document or email, but there's also a case where it doesn't need to exist. So that's where your nots come in. So we're going to take a look at that through today. So let's have a look again, Nikki, at the custom page that we like to use.
Okay, so we're creating a new policy. So as we recommend, it's easier sometimes to go into the custom page, then you know exactly what your rules are. So we go into custom, then custom, next. You give it an appropriate name. So today we're going to be talking about credit cards. So we're talking about PCI DSS regulations, which I'm sure people are familiar with. They've been around for a number of years now.
Yep.
We're skipping over administration units, but basically that's if you've got a complex organization where you've devolved admin responsibility down to different groups of users. Tends to be often on a global basis. I'm dealing with maybe EMEA users, and maybe Ryan's dealing with users in the Americas, for example. But for today, we're skipping over that. And as we said last time, it's important to consider what you're trying to protect. Microsoft bundle everything in together. It tends to be very complicated that way, and the conditions are very basic. So what we prefer is look at your target, where we go, and we want to protect information going out on email. Select that so you can create your particular rules.
Yep, indeed. Perfect. Yep. So let's go ahead and create a rule.
Now, you can have multiple rules within a policy. So we're going to give a rule a name, PCI, and our conditions. This is where we're going to build up a multiple set of conditions. So, Ryan, what should we include first as our first condition?
Well, I think first and foremost, right, Nikki, let's get content contained in, right? Because this is predominantly where people want to protect. They want to be able to protect their sensitive information, right? So I think based on that, mapping in a sensitivity type or a sensitivity label. So what we're going to do today, as I said, we're going to go through a bit of a complex condition, a scenario where lots of conditions are used. So first and foremost, let's identify the data we want to protect. Okay, so if we go sensitive information type and then pick out credit card.
Credit card numbers.
Yep, pick on that.
So you can have more than one in here, can't you?
You absolutely can. You can have, I think, up to 50 if memory serves me right, but we probably need to double check that, right? Now, next in line, okay, mapping a sensitivity labeling. Now, why is that important? Because if a credit card is in a document, but it's been labeled with a document that's got encryption on, or confidential or highly confidential, is it that much of a risk? Okay, because the document's wrapped in encryption. Probably not. But if that credit card exists in a document that's been labeled with something like public or personal or something like that, doesn't have any protection on and is just open to the outside world, that's where you want those extra conditions in to be able to detect for them and inspect that particular item. So if we go add again, please, Nikki.
And this time, sensitivity labels.
Yes, please.
And so we're going to be concerned if people are sending credit card number labels with if it's labeled public, for example.
Okay, so that's great, Nikki. So we've got our two conditions in it, right? So let's go to add group, just where your icon is. Yeah, perfect. Now what we want to do is we want to say, if this is leaving our environment, okay, if it's in our ecosystem, we probably don't really, it doesn't really matter that much. But if it's going outside, we definitely want to be able to watch it because it's credit card information mapped into an email or document that's public. Anybody can open that. So if you now go to add condition, and then if we go to content is shared from, right? And then we need people outside my organization. Now, that's fine. But what happens if you now want additional conditions in there to say, well, if it's got such a terminology in the subject of the email, it's got such a terminology in the actual document as well, we're fine with that because that public entity that's receiving that documentation is fine to receive it. And remember, this is just a hypothetical scenario that we're running through. So if we want to add in more conditions, we then now go to add a group just under what you've got add group at the moment, Nikki. So right to the left of you.
That one there?
Yeah, I think it's that one there. Just click on that one. Right. And then if you just flip to the knot, flick the knot on, and then just scroll up slightly so it's not. There we go. Right. Perfect. But we're now saying if it does not contain these other elements, right? So now you've got your includes, so your positives. Now we want to go through the excludes and the negatives to the document or the email that's in it. So we want to now say there's some secret wording in a document that only certain people would be allowed to work on, right? So we need to go and find, Nikki, in here where the subject or email body contains. All right. Subject contains words or phrases. At 2 down. Subject or body contains words or phrases, right?
Yeah. Well, no.
So in
Whereas
here,
I suppose that one is you could just have the subject line here, or here we're looking at the subject and the body.
Yes. What I've seen from some customers, which seems to be a bit of a theme, is that they'll have like this secret wording, right? Let's call it secret business, right? For argument's sake. And that is basically injected into the document or into the email body in white. So nobody can see that in the back end, right? And it's basically just invisible in the back end, if you like. So you've got all of those positives and includes, but only when your negatives and excludes come in, do you say, but if it contains this, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So this is all about building all those conditions. And of course, each scenario is going to be different, okay? But it's just to give you an emphasis of how to build out a nested grouping with DLP. Yes, exactly. Something around that, right? So we've got that in the subject or body. But what about if we need that also in the actual document or the document name? All right. So if we then say, okay, another add group and then a not.
Here's the second one. And then add the condition.
But let's do one thing, okay? Let's see if we can swap that and that you just created for an or. Right? That or there. And then just scroll up slightly. So you've got now, you see how it's flipped the one above to or?
We need to change that back to an and.
Right. Now, if you flick that to an and, here's a prime example of where I see a lot of people going wrong. They're creating the same added group inside of the same element. So just as an example here, what we need to do is remove the bottom one and then click the add group outside of the group that you just created. So you've got 2 add groups there.
Yeah.
It's the bottom one now we need because we want an or statement and a not. right? And then if you
that's true. Yeah.
Exactly. So now we can select the or not, okay? And then if you go to add condition and then go to the document one.
I wish these were in alphabetical order.
Do you know what? Do you know how many times I've heard that? People have said that all the time. And another one from Microsoft, if anybody's listening from Microsoft, having the ability to name certain aspects and entities whilst you're going through that. Okay. I know you've got the document names contains at the top, but the customers have asked if we could just name this section includes excludes or whatever the case may be. That's also another good topic to do. Right.
I suppose that's, I was going to say, I suppose that's a bit like when you do Power Automate, isn't it? When you do a Power Automate flow, you're going down and you can say, you know, if a condition equals A or a B or a similar type of thing. But in there, you can add in your notes and you can change the actual your actions on your flow to make it more meaningful. I think that's the equivalent thing that you're suggesting here.
Indeed. So like they always say, the more information that you can provide in this, because I would imagine some customers will build out many of these conditions, whether they're plus and minus, whether they're includes and excludes, whether they're positives or negatives. Having the ability to segment them and label them appropriately is such a benefit. So as you can see, right, now we've got a condition that looks for credit card information. It also looks for labels of public. So them two would have to be together. And then you've got content is shared outside, right? So that actual or there needs to be an and.
Yeah.
So that's been shared outside. But then we've got some additional conditions here that say, but if the subject or body contains these words, or the document contains these words, document name or words, phrases, it's essentially saying, I need to put all of this together to ensure that this particular rule works. Okay. Now you can go to whatever lens that you can go to. So just as an example here, right, Nikki, let's choose add group from there as well.
The within the not.
The other one, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Right. And then if we say or and then add a condition, and then a not, beg your pardon, Nikki, not first, and then add a condition. And let's say the recipient's address contains a recipient's domain equals, right? So you may know that that particular scenario of those conditions is fine, right, if the recipient's domain is XYZ. Now you can add as many domains in here as you want, okay? So you could have corporate A, corporate B, corporate C, corporate D, E, F, and G, okay? So if you're physically allowing that data to go out to that particular domain, whoever that may be, in here is where you will actually state that recipient. You can even put in here as well, sender's domain is. So that sender's domain can be something like your own. Okay. Now, if you've gone through lots of acquisitions and mergers over time, or you've got lots of accepted domains inside of your environment, they can also be mapped in here as well. So Microsoft still gives you the ability to use all of those conditions that you find with Exchange or each of those workloads and map them in as conditions as you go along. And even at the top there, I just saw sender's IP addresses, header matches patterns. So if you've got an additional solution that injects headers in, you can also use that from that perspective as well. But this is more around mapping in those nested groups when it comes to DLP, okay, and building out those complex rules. So that's where we are. So we've now got recipient is, right? So if you now scroll down for me, please, Nikki. Now you're at your actions, okay? So as we pulled through before, when we were talking about content is shared from, exactly where Nikki is now, we still need to remember that all those conditions are based on a particular action. And if that action is, if all those come together, that should go outside, okay? So if Nikki picks that now and then block only people outside of your organization, that's where we need to be. Okay, so that's basically building out multiple conditions inside of a DLP role. The feasibility is there for you. Not a lot of people know that those and or Boolean statements are available. But since they've been available, let me tell you, the uptake on DLP has been huge because you can do so much more with it now, especially with those nots as well. You can essentially build out whatever you want to ensure your includes and excludes are there for you regardless. Brilliant work from Microsoft, I think, on that.
Definitely. And I would say for a top tip, before you kind of jump in here, there's a lot of conditions here. I like to use a piece of paper or a whiteboard to map out the conditions. Think of yourself when you were back at school. You know, we used to do, you know, A plus B bracket or open bracket C plus D close bracket. Think of that sort of mindset about what those conditions are. And I find it's much easier if I kind of write that down on a piece of paper first, really understand where those brackets are, because if you get those brackets in the wrong place, you'll get a different outcome. And, you know, you can be scratching your head thinking, well, why is it not working?
I think also, I can't remember it was, but I think it's more recent. Microsoft also give you the opportunity to put a condition in if the document is not labeled. So if there's no label applied to that document, whatever. So if you don't have mandatory or default labeling enabled, and you have the scenario where a credit card is in an email or a document, and that is not labeled, there's also a condition in here for that as well. So that's another frequent one that I see.
Yeah, or you've got this one here rather than block. You've got, you could actually choose to encrypt. And then again, I've created some different labels here with encryption, so I can choose one of those labels. So you don't exactly have to block it if you've already got those labels with your predefined encryption. And some of those encryption I'd lock down to say only people in my organization and my trusted partners organization can open that. I was going to say, you were telling me earlier about a really good feature at the top here, this quick summary. So this page is quite long when you're going down, and it's quite a lot to actually to think, have I got it right? So if you go up to the top here, you can see these nesting. So again, you can see that's a set of brackets there, and you've got, you know, these conditions in here. So yeah, it does help you a little bit by having a look there.
Yeah, so very good. And I think this is a very good topic from Microsoft, okay, adding the quick summary in, because I've recently worked with some customers that have had maybe 30 or 40 different types of exceptions in, or even 30, 40 different types of nested groups in. So as you can see down the left-hand side, right, you have a gray line, okay, that's impartial of your or statements. And then within that, you've got the and not statement together. So what it's essentially telling you is that this is all within the nested group because everything's in that particular alignment, you see. If you've not got that, if you've got some of those that are outside of that and some of that are segmented here and there, you've not selected the right add group. So that's a really good way to understand. Okay, I built this out. I've got what I need. Let's go right to the top. Let's click on that quick summary and let's understand if I've got this in the right flavor. If you've got a gray line all the way down to the bottom on the left-hand side, which is your outer line, you've got it right. If you haven't and you've got a break in there, okay, it's not correct if you want everything bundled together as a bunch of conditions. Really important to remember. As I stated before, I've worked with some customers that thought they've got this right, not knowing that the quick summary is there because it is quite hidden. Even when you've got lots of conditions in there, it's quite hidden. Coming up, enabling that's going to give you your yes or no answer. Is this all nested? Yes, there's a gray line all the way down the left-hand side. Is it not? No, because you've got staggered lines in there. Okay. And like I say, if you've got lots of conditions in there, get up here, get that enabled. It's so much easier for you to understand. Great addition from Microsoft.
Yeah, because the scenario that we've had in what we've showed you here was if it had credit card numbers and it had that public label. Yes. And then we're saying that's your condition. And then we're saying if it's then shared outside the organization, but not if it's shared with contoso.com or it's got the secret information or the trusted advisor in the email subject or body or the Word document. Now, if we'd have got this wrong, we could have written it oh, it's a credit card number and it's got the label and it's been shared outside the organization. That would have stopped that and say, or the email is being shared, not being shared with Contoso. Then you've got two completely different sets of conditions. So it's going to start triggering. It's going to say, oh, this email is, not Contoso, and you're going to get a lot of false positives. So it is really important to test this out as well before you switch it on.
Of course, as always, when you're working with DLP, once you get through to the point where you can either test with notifications, turn on straight away, or leave off, turn off, I think it is, you always want to sample this out first and foremost, especially if you're adding multiple conditions in and a severe action such as a block or an encrypt. Adding this in is essential to understanding A, the response from your environment and the data that you're working with, and B, ensuring that you're not putting any outright blocks in place, because the last thing you want is to roll this out and get a flood of support calls come through and say, I can no longer email this person because I'm doing X, Y, Z. Having that in place is great. Always test them out first and foremost, especially if they're as complex as what I've seen recently with some customers. We have many, many conditions and they're all positive, or there are some positives and negatives. Getting it right is essential.
And I think also once you've got it in the test mode, then you can roll it out, and then try, when you do roll it out, think about how you're going to test it. Put your positive test conditions in and your negative test conditions. And the other thing that I think is important as well, when we go up to the top with this sensitive information type, we can say what volume of data as well. I think that's another thing to add in here. So we've built in this condition and we're saying, well, actually, is sharing of one credit card number, is it that much of a risk? And then this is based down to your tolerance in your organization. You can say, well, here we're saying from 1 to any. So 1 or more credit cards it's going to trigger. Well, you might have some valid reasons for that. You may say, actually, I'm only concerned with that bulk movement of data. So you could say, well, actually, I'm only interested if it is from 50. So if you send just 1 or 2 in there, probably 15 maybe is too high, but you may say, well, actually, 5 or more. So again, think about this, because what you want to do is that fine balance is, of that productivity and security. You want to block what shouldn't be going out, but allow people to get on with their day-to-day business.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, right, Nick? And that also leads me on to a recent project we worked on, because what they had is they had a medium and high rule. Okay, now the medium rule was, so the medium rule was instance count 1 to 10, and the high was 10 to any. Okay, so if you're wanting to build out those specifics and you're wanting to ensure that those who do need to get data out, okay, can do so in a safe manner. But those who essentially don't need to send who do need to send out a lot, you can put them in a different rule under the same policy. So as you've got the 1 to 10, that might be your medium or low rule. But your high rule then, or your second rule, okay, can be 10 to 100. So you can essentially build that out yourself. So if you're wanting to do that and having multiple instance counts based on a low, medium, or high, that's also available for you as well. And they can be built out under the same policy. So if the policy has a specific reasoning or a specific topic on how to work, build them out underneath. Multiple rules. So easy to do.
So this is where you would create that second role. So we've created one and we're saying medium, that's 1 to 10. You might want to do something. Then you may say from another number. So it would need to be 11 and more. Make sure you think about that number. Don't do 1 to 10 and then do 5 to 50, because again, the rules are going to, it'll get confused because you'll have priority here and you might have the wrong role triggered. So think about that. If one's 1 to 10, the next one needs to be 11 onwards, and don't leave any gaps as well in the middle.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah, make sure those numerals are right, because it's not going to know But when it gets to 10, it's going to potentially trigger the first rule in the list, because it works top to bottom, of course. So you'd always want your least severe rule at the top and your most severe at the bottom. So if your least one is just a monitor on the 1 to 10, and the medium one is a block from 11 to 100, that needs to be second in line. So that's pretty much how you use advanced data loss prevention, by adding many conditions in and then adding a simple action in the background. And always remember, if it's for a specific workload that you're working on, you wanting data to be prevented from loss on, only choose that workload, because you'll get more from the rule set than you would by combining everything together. Specifically, if you're using lots of conditions, like I say, not to label the point. If they're positive or negative, include or exclude, you want those conditions granular. And like Nikki said before, write it out. Think of the scenario that you're working with and think of the outcome. What is the workload and what is the outcome, and what are those conditions in between? So hopefully that's been helpful for you today. Anything more to add from your side, Nikki?
No, as I say, exactly as you say, plan it out. This is all about planning. This is about testing. And then you're going to have to adapt. I think even in the best projects, you will launch this. You would think you'll have gone around and you've done enough interviews and find out all the use cases in the company, but you won't. There will always be somebody that has a particular use case that you weren't aware of. Now, this is where it's really important to start monitoring your DLP policies and have that justification. Why do we need to do that? Investigate those, fix them, and then over time, those kind of false positives won't occur.
Indeed. Well, I hope that's been helpful for you. We do have another episode coming on DLP, but more specifically around endpoint DLP. So hopefully we'll see you very shortly. And again, if you enjoyed this episode and you enjoyed what we're doing here at All Things M365 Compliance, give us a like and subscribe. Share it if you think somebody else is going to benefit from it. And hopefully we'll see you next time. Thanks for now.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you.